So
Barely.
what's not working with this team? Because we could almost have a repeat conversation as the one we had last week, where the schedule's not great, another marginal opponent, but another close game to a certain extent, at least on the scoreboard, and Anthony Brown is a bit of a target out there.
Yeah, I mean, he's, basically game manager. Like we've said it all year, you're going to have some good, you're going to have some bad. I don't think anybody was going to throw the ball well in those conditions, not to make an excuse or whatever, but, he was 10 of 20, just under 100 yards, and did what he needed to do. But again, looked terrible in one interception to start the game, just absolutely brutal, but picked it up down the stretch. He is the guy. I think all the boo birds have been quieted. I know that people wanted the freshman to come in early, Ty Thompson, but I don't think that's going to happen. And if it was going to happen, they already had their opportunity and the window closed. And I do think that kind of galvanized the team a little bit. There's some veterans on this team who think this is the time. There were a lot of fans who were like, no, we need to build for the future. We've got this Georgia game next year, but this is the year where you have KT. This is the year where you have one of the best players in the country, and you have a bunch of other guys on this team that are seniors that want this thing now, and you got to strike while the iron's hot. I think Oregon's barely hanging on. I was surprised with the 4 spot for sure. I do think it was nice to see that the committee put Oregon in front of Ohio State just purely on that head-to-head win alone. I think you need to value that. But obviously, since that win, Oregon has not looked good. Ohio State has looked good. So one school's trending upward, one school's kind of hanging on or trending downward. And Oregon needs to pick up the pieces. And this game this weekend scares the heck out of me. It's Pac-12 after dark. Weird stuff happens out here. It's going to be the last game. Washington State always is close. A couple of years ago, it was the last-second field goal Oregon had to make to win it when Cam Lewis was a freshman. So I expect something very similar. This team has been galvanized after their coach, Nick Rolovich, is excused because of his non-compliance with the vaccine mandate. And they galvanized the team. Fan base is absolutely fired up, and they like what they've seen. They've been winning games that they're not expected to win. They've got a pretty electric quarterback, a pretty fun quarterback to watch, Jaden DeLora. And I think it's just one of those things where it's a matchup issue. And I think if Oregon plays their game, I don't think Washington State should be a problem at all. I think they're a 2-touchdown favorite right now. And I think they should be able to be close to that. And it would be great if they could cover it. I mean, a 2-touchdown win this year would feel like a blowout, Mark. I mean, holy moly. But it's the next week that scares the living daylights out of me. And that's at Utah. Utah's playing like the best team in the conference right now. They are just absolutely a machine, and they look a lot like the Ducks. They're a very physical team. They want to run the ball. They're good defensively up front. It's like looking in the mirror. And so I think that's a game that's going to be wild. And long-term for these Ducks, I know I see a lot of people out there that are thinking, oh, yeah, the Ducks are in the playoff. No way. The percentage number for the people who, put all those numbers out, right, it's like 3% that they're going to make the playoff. I mean, it's terribly low.
3?
That's what I saw. I mean, it was literally, and it was like, that's because one, you got to win out the rest of the Pac-12 schedule, which is going to be tough for the Ducks. Also, I think you're going to have to beat Utah twice. You have to beat them twice in 3 weeks. That's going to be really difficult. Now, Oklahoma's going to have a similar situation by having to try to do that round robin schedule and then get that Big 12 champion. And maybe they face Oklahoma State twice or something, or Baylor twice, or whatever the case may be. But wow, it could be a situation where you're going to have to get Utah up there in Salt Lake City, tough place to play, and then go play your rivalry game, and then come right back and play Utah again in Vegas. If that's the way it works out, that's going to be a tough stretch.
It will be. I got to say that this situation is seriously challenging my stance that as long as two teams have the same record, that I go head-to-head in my rankings. Right. And I have continued to do that, and I will stand by that. But I got to tell you, if Ohio State runs the table,
right,
and Purdue has become a factor in this, and Purdue's now a decent team and a challenger, and they've got to run through after wins against Minnesota a long time ago, Penn State recently, and annihilating the likes of the it would be
sure
similar to Oregon besting Cal and some of those teams in the Pac-12 54-7, and the scores that Ohio State's put up on Indiana and Rutgers and Maryland, 66 points on Maryland, who's a 5-4 team, probably going to go to a bowl game. And now it's Purdue, Michigan State, Michigan in a Big Ten championship game, most likely against Wisconsin, up against that Oregon schedule. I don't know. I understand both arguments. I think they're both reasonable. Resume or the head-to-head. I can understand both, and I've always been a head-to-head guy as long as the record is the same.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I love what you do on your own top 25. I think you're right on it, and I agree that the head-to-head should matter. Again, like we said last time, why play the game if the head-to-head doesn't matter? Then why are you playing these non-conference games? But I do think that you're 100% spot on. The better season after that win has obviously been Ohio State, and if they finish off with these last 3 games, with Purdue picking up the way that they are, the giant killers they are. I saw some stat that they're the number 1 team in the amount of top 5 wins or wins against the top 5 opponent. I mean, that says a lot. Now, that also says there's always a top 5 opponent in the Big Ten for them to pick off. But Big Ten is a great football conference. And so, yes, even though those teams that are losing and not really picking up those same records, pair that up with a Pac-12 team right now, and I bet the Big Ten team wins. So, again, that's going to be a tough one for the committee to figure out. I think the only way to make it really clean is if Cincinnati loses, if Alabama loses to Georgia. I think there's going to be real question marks down the stretch if Cincinnati wins out, and if maybe Alabama even loses a very close game, or if chaos happens, if Alabama beats Georgia. Then I think you're getting 2 SEC schools in.
Well, regardless of what happens the rest of the season, if Mario Cristobal does not receive a Christmas card from every football program in the Pac-12, plus, of course, from the commissioner of the Pac-12 for at least keeping this conference in the conversation this deep in the season. Otherwise, if they don't beat Ohio State, talk about nobody talking about the Pac-12 whatsoever. It would be completely in the abyss right now.
Yeah, and we were talking about that last week. We were talking about, if Clemson hadn't fallen off this hard this year, then, Pac-12 loves the fact the ACC looks like the worst conference right now, because if it wasn't for them, we'd be by far the worst conference. I mean, this conference lost 2 teams in non-conference to FCS teams. It's such a strange year, and we knew it was going to be a weird year after COVID. We didn't know what was going to necessarily go down. There's a lot of different moving parts out here, but right now, as it sits right now, I think Pac-12 is playing pretty good football at this point in the season. I think the 2 best teams are obviously showing up, and that's Utah and Oregon. I do think that both those teams are going at it in a very traditional manner. Not spread offense style, not a lot of the other sort of stuff that's catch on. I think they're going back to power and back to physicality, which will do well, hopefully, down the stretch. Again, that's one of the coolest things about football, right? It starts off very hot in the summer. You can do whatever on the field. Teams are going everywhere. It ends with absolute train wreck weather and climate and everything else. And unless you're in a dome, you're going to have to fight through some of that.